Hi, it's May the 6th, 2025, gamblersadvisory.com, a free site, bettingangle.us, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, this morning, I'm just going to ramble. I think it's important to always have a macro, always have three or four themes that you're pursuing. Um, let's just start in the world of crypto. I'll pivot to sports in a second. I see that the market is down right now. Folks need to realize that the prices in the crypto market are crazy. They don't come close to reflecting what's happening with elite cryptocurrencies in the space. All you have to do is read up on the upgrades that are happening right now to major networks like Ethereum and Casper. Ethereum, as I make this video, is somehow under $1,800 a coin. I understand there's a group out there that doesn't believe in crypto, doesn't seem to have any idea that you have central banks all over the globe right now thinking about different cryptocurrencies. Not all of the central banks are limiting themselves to Bitcoin, right? So this is like an investment floundering in the general market. Again, Ethereum under 1800 this morning. Caspa under 10 cents this morning. Right? This is like a general market floundering. While central banks are literally one announcement away from having these cryptos be embraced and, run up. Understand too, we're talking about billions of dollars flowing into these cryptocurrencies. This is a clear mispricing, right? The only thing in the world on par with the mispricing of crypto right now is the mispricing of silver. The gold-silver ratio now is more than 100 to 1. 100 to 1. Right? Just look at price history. You realize that silver is going to explode because gold's not going to slow down anytime soon. Here again, if you have the Chinese central bank accumulating gold, if you have, concern in the United States to the point where, we're talking about auditing Fort Knox for the first time in decades, formally auditing it, when you realize that Russia, their central bank, is accumulating gold, and of course gold is around all-time highs in terms of the dollar, right? It's been around all-time highs denominated in different currencies. And if you realize that right now the future of fiat currency is being challenged around the globe, not just by gold, but also by cryptocurrency, then you have to ask yourself, what is going to slow gold down in the coming years? And folks, the answer is nothing. Right? The global fear of inflation is going to propel gold for quite some time. Right? Think about the United States. How do debtors get out of debts? By inflating the currency, if they can. That's what the United States government is about to do. Let's shift gears. Let's talk about economics. I know it sounds dull until you realize how little we know about economics. One of the best baseball players I've seen in my life, and I understand the guy's personality has some sharp edges. I understand some people close to the guy feel that they've been rubbed the wrong way. Right? I'm not saying the guy is guy of the year. What I am saying is that Alex Rodriguez was so good that we forget that at one point he went 40-40, right? You can tell a guy is great when he's doing great things and you don't even notice them because there are other better things that the guy has been doing, right? So Jordan, for example, led the league in steals 3 times. You never hear people mention that, right? Steph Curry led the league in steals one year. No one even mentions that. Well, just understand ARod, in addition to a lot of home runs, and understand ARod, spent a huge portion of his career playing shortstop, right? In other words, this is the consummate hitter at a traditionally weak hitting position, right? Just understand ARod was that rare power hitting shortstop who delivered on home runs, who could also steal bases, who, pitchers were lucky to get a fastball by. Great player. Well, there was a time when ARod shocked everyone. And he signed a deal where he was getting something like $25 million a year. And at the time, we gasped. Right? It was like, oh my God. ARod was well paid throughout his career. But that contract topped it all. And you thought, my goodness, ARod is being compensated for his labor. Now, I want you to remember the numbers, right? $25 million a year. I'm sure there are some years in there where ARod made even more than that, right? But when he joined the Texas Rangers, that was a moment in baseball, right, folks? It might shock folks. This is the world of finance. It might shock folks to realize that for all the Hall of Fame brilliance that ARod threw down as a baseball player, and you and I know he'd be in the Hall of Fame, but for the PED overhang, right? Same thing with Barry Bonds, same thing with Mark McGwire, same thing with Sammy Sosa, right? Baseball has a whole group of uncrowned players because of this PED overhang. But for all of ARod's baseball brilliance, understand that ARod arguably has made more money in the last 5 years being an owner, 50% owner of the NBA's Minnesota Timberwolves than he did his entire baseball career. Right? I know it's shocking. You think, wow, these athletes are making so much money. Right? But let's do the math. ARod, with a partner, bought the Minnesota Timberwolves, agreed to buy them in something like 2021 for $1.5 billion. Right? Remember that price tag, $1.5 billion. Right? That's within the last 5 years. Now, basketball, and I know basketball had slow ratings to start the season. You had, countless NBA stars from the past come out and say, hey, the reason why they're getting low ratings is, they've ruined the game with three-point shooting. Whatever new innovation is hot and has fans excited, as you can imagine, old-timers are bitter about. Right? They see today's athletes getting paid more than them. Right? They themselves have numbers that show that they struggled from 3. So they want you to believe that an area of the game that's vibrant now that they didn't emphasize is ruining the game. So you had a bunch of old NBA players saying things like, I don't even watch the game. These videos are up on YouTube. Right? I don't even watch the game because, these developments have detracted from the game, and that's why the game is struggling in terms of, the TV viewership. Well, understand the TV viewership came back with a vengeance the last third of the season. Right? Came back with a vengeance. And basketball has advantages on many sports in terms of its future. Number one, it's truly a global sport, right? The NFL, not a lot of players outside of kickers come from Europe or Asia, right? You really can't have an American football part of the Olympics that's going to be close to a level playing field anytime soon. But yet you have foreign stars in the NBA and they're winning MVPs, right? You have other foreign stars who, are just showing up in the NBA and they're dominant. Wemby, for example, finished second in Defensive Player of the Year his rookie year. Right, folks, that, you know, foreign player involvement has made the Olympics interesting because it's just a matter of time before we realize that the United States has no clear advantage on the rest of the world in terms of the elite basketball players on its roster, right? The U.S. was lucky to win this last Olympic Games. So you have foreign involvement. Folks, that's worth a lot of money. There's no CTE risk, right? As rough and tumble as some players can be in the NBA, it's nothing close to the NFL. Understand, it's under wraps right now, but you have some beloved NFL players who have died because of CTE problems, right? That's structural. That's part of the game. It's not going to go away anytime soon. Let me say, too, that unlike some other sports, take hockey, where you need an ice rink, everyone needs to have expensive sticks to play, right? You need padding because you're going to get roughed up. You need skates. You need to know how to ice skate. With basketball, the game's accessible. There just has to be a hoop someplace. Someone just has to have a basketball, right? Rich and poor can play the game, right? You go to the playground, one of the games you can play with your neighbors is basketball, right? The low entry point, the low cost of entry is going to keep this game popular. Now understand, within the last 5 years, ARod and his partner bought the Minnesota Timberwolves for $1.5 billion, right? $1.5 billion. Since then, the Mavericks have sold for $3.5 billion. Since then, the Suns have sold for $4 billion. Since then, the Celtics have sold for $6.1 billion. Now, you and I know in this world you have other people involved behind the scenes. We say ARod owns 50% of the team, but he's made promises to raise the capital because half of $1.5 billion is $750 million. Folks, in the world of finance, these ballers, even a guy with strings of businesses in places like Mexico, like ARod has, right, don't quite have the money that some other players have, right? When I say players, I mean participants in this space. It's a rarefied air when you're talking about owning a sports team. So, not surprisingly, Eric Schmidt, formerly of Google, has a role in the ownership group. Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York City, right, head honcho at Bloomberg's media outlet. He has a hand in this ownership group. I believe the role they play is they put up some money, you own the team, but if you can't meet your obligations to them, then they, of course, can step in and take over part of your ownership interest, right? Also, in the unlikely event that there's a bankruptcy or liquidation, they're like a preferred stockholder. They get priority over other investors, right? But let's do the math. Minnesota is a semifinalist right now, right? They have a guy who's fascinating, Anthony Edwards, who flatly says he doesn't want to be the face of the NBA. The problem is he's an exciting player to watch. He's adding to his game. Look at his three-point percentage this year, right? And of course, he's led his team to the semifinals. So just understand, you have an iconic player, you have a well-built team, they're in the playoffs. Let's say ARod's team has just doubled in value, with an understanding that ARod paid less than 25% of what the Celtics just went for. We understand the Celtics are a premium brand in the sport, long history. Russell, Bird, Cowens, let's not overlook him, right? Havlicek, Tatum, Jaylen Brown. We understand that green in the New England area carries a certain weight, right? We all have heard of the Boston Garden. We understand the Celtics are a premium brand. But ARod got the T-Wolves for less than 25% of the recent sales price for the Celtics. So let's be conservative here. And let's say the T-Wolves have doubled in value. Right, folks? If they win the NBA title, that value is going to increase even more. What that means is that ARod will have made 100% profit within the last 5 years on his $750 million ownership interest in the Minnesota Timberwolves. Right? So in the last 5 years, and the real money is in the passive income. Right? You own a home, then it doubles in value. Right? The real money is in waiting and having the asset increase in value. You heard me mention gold earlier. That's the value of gold. Right? Well, ARod, folks, the team has jumped in value, his interest in the team. We're taking the 1.5 purchase price, dividing it by 2 because he has a 50% stake. He's made $750 million off the team. And it's unrealized. That's where the real action is. Understand economics. Right? He's not even getting taxed on it. Because while the value of the asset has increased in value, he hasn't cashed it in. Right? So ARod, the baseball player, who we were celebrating, making $25 million a year in a contract, right, has just clocked, over the last 5 years, more than $100 million, right, per year. Well more than that. Each year for the last 5 years as an NBA owner. And I need for players to realize that while the fans pressured ARod when he was an employee making $25 million a year, the real trick of the super wealthy is making hundreds of million dollars a year untaxable in passive income, and the fans aren't even paying attention. Right? I have no doubt that Michael Jordan, great player, one of the best I've seen in any sport, made more money owning the Charlotte Bobcats, the Charlotte Hornets, than he made his playing career. Right? Such is the power of ownership. Let's talk other sports. When I was a kid, he's a little before my time, but I looked at the numbers that Wilt Chamberlain put up, and I didn't understand. I just did not understand how Chamberlain had fewer MVPs than other people. Right? It just seemed to me that Chamberlain, a guy who I believe he leads the league in rebounding 11 times, and understand he was the gold standard at the time in terms of points per game. Right? He averaged over 30 points per game. I just didn't understand how Bill Russell was even competitive with Chamberlain in terms of individual awards. Right? Understand the year Chamberlain averaged more than 50 a game, they gave the MVP to Bill Russell. So I thought to myself, that couldn't happen now. That couldn't happen here. Right? Now, what I want the Shai Gilgeous Alexander crowd in the comment section of this YouTube video to do, because he's going to win the MVP, is to explain to us the clear gap in game one of the OKC versus Denver series. Because understand, he was on the court with the best player in the game, in my opinion, Joker. Right now, I'm someone who does not believe in participation trophies. Right? I'm someone who believes that if a guy's the best player in the league, if you're looking at his team and you realize that there is no player in the league who is more valuable to his team than this guy, right? If you're a bettor and you're thinking to yourself, wow, if I hear the Bulls are playing without Michael Jordan, then my ticket is worth what? 20% of what it was, right? That's how it is right now with the Nuggets and Joker. You understand. No Joker, no bacon, right? You understand that. So you had an exhausted Nuggets team. They were just taken. They struggled to get out of the first round, right? They're tired. They barely won that first round series against the Clippers. I know they look good in game 7. Just understand, to win one game, it took an Aaron Gordon dunk at the very end of the game. They struggled against the Clippers. Struggled. Right? Truth be told, Clippers, underrated team. But just understand, here you had an exhausted Nuggets team. And they took on the 68-win OKC Thunder in Oklahoma City. And what happened was a nuclear bomb went off. A guy who you're about to rip off in the MVP contest just decided, look, I've got to carry this team. I mean, literally. That's the thought process. Joker throws down one of the best games of the year in game 1. Folks, the bomb went off. Who cares who the public is going to give the MVP to? Shai wasn't close. Shai didn't belong in the building with Joker. Right? You saw parts of Joker's game and you understood this guy's unstoppable. Right? Whether he's passing, whether he's back to the basket, whether he is 15 to 20 feet away from the basket, facing the basket. Joker in game 1 made a mockery of this year's MVP award contest. You really think there's a contest? Look, I love Shai. Shai is one of the best players in the league. But what Joker's doing is Wilt level. What Joker's doing is Michael level. So what are we doing as the fans? We're doing the same things we did to Wilt and Jordan. Right? So Wilt, too dominant. Right? Only wins 4 MVPs. Right, folks? It's ridiculous. Right? The best thing to happen to Wilt is Joker. Because you saw Joker in contention to win the assist title from the center position. And then the pundits had to tell you that only one guy in NBA history had won the assist title from the center position. And it was Wilt Chamberlain. Right? Jordan, I watched an All-Star game. Jordan actually got a triple-double in the All-Star game. He was that dominant. The mood on the telecast was blasé. They gave the MVP to Glenn Rice. I mean, Jordan was on the league's dominant team. He was the scoring leader. That year they gave the MVP to Karl Malone. Right, folks? There's a fatigue around greatness. You look at a guy and you think, you know what? He's gotten what he deserved. We've given him MVPs in the past. He's on every other Gatorade commercial. He's overexposed. Right? Then we start looking away from the guy. Then we start ignoring the guy. Right? Now, you and I know Joker should have had 4 MVPs, not 3. That Joel Embiid MVP was a slap in the face. You mean to tell me they're going to give the MVP to a guy at Joker's position who has, what, half his assists? That was a farce. I don't care how good Embiid's career has been. I don't care how much people wanted a public spotlight on Joel Embiid. He wasn't the MVP that year. Right? Well, now they're going to top themselves. They're going to give the MVP to somebody else, right? Shai's a great player, right? I thought the award was the MVP award. Looking at yesterday's game, you couldn't even imagine the OKC Thunder being competitive without Joker. Right? He's a Magic Johnson guy. You saw a lot of guys getting numbers, and you understood it's because Joker was passing them the ball. Joker was setting things up. The defense was collapsing around Joker, leaving guys wide open. So let's enjoy Joker, right? He's an Ali figure. There's a year where Ring Magazine flatly told you Ali would have been our fighter of the year. But we didn't like his lack of sportsmanship in yelling, "What's my name?" repeatedly to Ernie Terrell in a fight. I mean, folks, we want to overlook greats. Okay, that's fine. Right? You might as well have the NBA say, we're going to overlook Joker. Foreign-born player, has already won 3 MVPs. Right? We want to share the spotlight with others. You might as well do that because, let's face it, on the merits, this year belongs to him. He was just on the court with the guy who's going to be anointed MVP. And he showed you that guy did not belong on the court with him. Let's talk boxing. Now, boxing is a great sport. It's a craft. I don't think we fully pay attention to the details. I think we also fall in love with fighters who aren't as good as some lesser loved guys. So, I always knew, right? Now, sometimes I'm wrong on these bets, like everyone else. Future is uncertain. But in my heart, I always knew that Manny Pacquiao, who was loved, was not as good as Floyd Mayweather. Right? Defense is boring. I'd see a Mayweather fight where Mayweather never got hit in the head. I mean, Mayweather's standing there, and he's just blocking everything that's thrown at him. Right? I saw that Mayweather left hook. I saw Mayweather's level of athleticism, and I realized, okay, maybe he's not as flashy as combination punchers, right? Mayweather's really more of a pot shotter. But my goodness, this guy could take away your best punches. My goodness, that left hook was hair trigger. Manny Pacquiao fought Juan Manuel Marquez and struggled. Right outside of the first round of the first fight, Manny's struggling against Juan Manuel Marquez. If you ever want to see a lopsided fight, and this is the secret to Mayweather, he's fighting Hall of Fame fighters, and it's lopsided. Right? Take a look at Juan Manuel Marquez against Floyd Mayweather. But Mayweather wasn't loved. You're seeing that now. Right? Tom, Dick, and Harry want to tell you, that they have information about Mayweather's finances. Right? Well, in boxing, let's talk about some loved fighters. I'll say some hard things here, but people need to understand that We all have weaknesses. Boxing is a complicated sport. A guy could be great at some things and bad at others. So, back in the world of VCRs, my dad kept telling me about Joe Louis. And I spent my childhood looking at, some Joe Louis fights. The problem was I'm looking at Joe Louis's feet. Right now, I'm a casual fan. I'm an outsider, right? I'm not a trainer. I'm not a manager. I'm an outsider, right? But I bet on sports, even as a kid. And I'm looking at Louis's feet, and I thought, how could this guy compete with an Ali? Ali even had something called the Ali Shuffle, where Ali wanted you looking at his feet. His feet were that good. He'd be in front of you, then he'd do a shuffle. So an opponent wouldn't know when Ali's next punch was coming, because Ali wouldn't plant his feet and make it obvious. He hid when he was going to plant his feet. Louis had nothing like that. What's the fight where Louis gets up on his toes and starts moving his feet? Folks, there is none. Right? Well, let me say this. Canelo, William Skull. Understand there's a trade-off boxers make. Canelo's one of the hardest punchers in the sport pound for pound. But to hit that hard, Canelo has to plant his feet. Right? He has to go flat-footed. Now, to be a boxer puncher, you have to be a dancer. It has to be the kind of thing where you're moving around the ring, but you understand there's going to come a time, and it's going to look like the blink of an eye, where you set your feet. So you'll be shuffling along. You'll be moving along, right? You'll be dancing, they used to call it. Then in a split second, you're going to set your feet and fire. Right? That's not Saul Alvarez. Right? Understand, Saul Alvarez, defensively blessed, spectacular puncher, doesn't have his feet together where he can run over to a guy and pin him against the ropes. Right? He's not Roberto Duran. So you had a guy dancing in front of him for 12 rounds. Skull, by the way, believes he won the fight. Look at the post-fight Skull interviews. Skull's made the point that he was there in the 7th round and he didn't feel he was getting hit. He felt he was landing on Canelo more than Canelo was landing on him. Folks, I'm talking about one of the biggest names in the sport. Right? So Canelo's talking with his next opponent, Terence Crawford, after the fight, and he says, look, I hope you don't fight me like Skull just did. Why wouldn't he? Right? Obviously, there's a fight style out there that dampens Canelo's ability to hurt them. Right? Now, Canelo was able to move his feet against Jermell Marlo, right? But understand, Marlo is an ambush fighter. He's not a boxer puncher. He's not the guy who, gets you in the pocket and he's still moving and he's punishing you. Right? He's dancing. One of the secrets to Ray Robinson, boxer puncher, is that Ray was a dancer. We know that because, believe it or not, he left boxing to do song and dance. Right? So Ray Robinson's in front of you. He's on the balls of his feet. Vicious puncher. Vicious. Right? That anchor punch floors Gene Fulmer with one shot. Right? But Ray Robinson could hide his legs. Right? So he's moving his legs, sets his legs. It's a moment, is throwing big shots. Right? Saul Alvarez, let's just say if you're looking for weaknesses, that could make things competitive. Look at Canelo's legs. Right? I mentioned Mayweather earlier. The two guys fought. Mayweather, the early part of that fight's riveting stuff, folks. Mayweather's in front of Canelo. Mayweather's even doing high-risk moves like throwing jabs to Canelo's body. Right? Understand how high-risk that is. While you're leaned down, throwing a jab to a guy's body, parts of you are open to get hit. And Canelo couldn't match Mayweather's athleticism. Right? Mayweather got out to a lead. The real problem Mayweather had in that fight were his hands. Right? He has his father in his corner. At one point, Mayweather goes over to the corner, and his father says to him, "Your hands," and Mayweather nods. Right? Mayweather's real challenge wasn't his opponent that night. It was his own body. Right? An older Mayweather damn near shuts out Canelo for at least the first 6-7 rounds of that fight. Don't be fooled by the scoring, where one judge had that fight a draw. Right? Let's talk about another guy. Again, we're naming the biggest names in the sport. Right? Inoue. I was watching a fight. Not even this last fight. An earlier fight. It was Inoue against Neri. And Inoue gets hit with a shot and goes down. And importantly, it's not like the guy is threading the needle who hits him. Inoue is blessed. He's blessed. Just like Pacquiao was blessed with hand speed and power. Right? And of course, Pacquiao's a southpaw, so it's even tougher. Right? Inoue is Joe Louis offensively. He's blessed with power, and it's power that comes from a core, right? His center of gravity is hard to figure out because he's throwing short punches. He doesn't seem to be leaning into the shot. But yet you notice opponents are stood up off his shots. In other words, blessed puncher doesn't need a wind-up. Can knock you out and it looks like he's just tapping you. That's a rare talent. The problem is when you're that blessed in punching power, on the way up, you might not pay attention to your defense. What's the difference between Bruno Sirage stopping Jaime Munguia's defense in that fight? Right? Sirage comes across, hits Munguia, who doesn't have a hand up, gets hit flush in the face, gets stopped. What's the difference between Jaime Munguia's defense and Inoue's defense in his last match against Cardenas? Nothing. Right? In fact, there is one difference. Inoue was able to get up. Folks, he got hit flush. He could have lost his title. He could have lost his unbeaten streak on that shot. He got hit clean. Understand, he's high risk. Right? He's there to be hit because part of his game is leaning back. Right? Ali had this problem. Understand, Ali's dropped in the 60s by multiple opponents. Right? When your defense consists of trusting your reflexes. Right? Punches on the way, you want to land your shot. This is where Inoue hits defenseless people. It's off counters. To get the counter, Inoue's taking chances. So a guy throws a punch, Inoue thinks he could just lean back and have his hands low and then come back and throw. Right? It looks dazzling when it works. Right? But understand, when it doesn't work, when your lean isn't a full lean back, you're going to get hit. Worse yet, when you get in the habit of not lifting a hand, when you're not defensively blessed, you're going to fall into a pattern where a guy throws the punch and you're not ready for it. Right? You don't have the muscle memory of, realizing this guy has an open right hand. Let me get a hand up. Right? You're going to reach a point in your career, and Inoue's at that point. Let me name another big name. Ennis is at that point where these guys are getting hit with flush shots. Let's enjoy the next 18 months, because I'm just telling you, as you get older, your athleticism fades. So Ali in the 60s, let's remember, he gets dropped by Sonny Banks. He gets dropped by Henry Cooper. Right? Ali in the 60s gives way to the Ali of the 70s, who's a rope-a-doper, who has his hands up. Right? He understood he no longer had the reflexes to just lean back and have the shot pass him. He needed more of a defensive construct. So, these fighters fascinate me because the public thinks they're all bulletproof. Right? Canelo had a hard time catching up with Dimitri Bivol. And Bivol's interesting because when he did, Bivol, who marks up, was able to block the shots. So at the end of the fight, you actually see where Bivol was hit. And you see that his arms caught most of what Canelo was throwing. Right? Canelo couldn't do Roberto Duran moves where he runs over to Bivol, has a shoulder on a clavicle, and is deep inside throwing shots. Right? Didn't have the Joe Frazier level of foot speed. Right? Inoue, let's face it, he's not only not defensively blessed, he's defensively challenged. Right? There's a certain type of fighter, and I don't know who's out there in Inoue's division, who understands when they're fighting a guy who doesn't put his hands up to block shots, who's just relying at times on leaning back. You have a Roy Jones type of fighter who is going to try to feint you into position. In other words, he's feinting. The idea is, if I trick you with a feint to lean back, then I'll catch you as you lean back into the pocket. Right? Someone with ring coverage, if they time the entry point the right way, could also have you lean back and then hit you. Let's talk about another guy in boxing who's highly regarded and who has a vibrant fan base. Ryan Garcia. Now, there's a film, it's on X, of Garcia next to a guy with blinding hand speed. Granted, he's older now, right? Ray Leonard. And they both are throwing a flurry together, right? And it's clear that as fast as Ray is in that video, and again, I'm not saying this is prime Ray, right? Ray fought in the 70s, right? He's a gold medal winner in the 76 Olympics. So this is senior citizen Ray. He's in the 60s now. But understand, Ray still has hand speed. And you notice Ryan Garcia's hand speed is faster. Right? Garcia also has size. He's taller than most people. He's taller than Rolly Romero. And he has one of boxing's best punches, a left hook. Here's the problem with him. We'll call it flow. Right? What happens if you're not landing left hooks? Worse yet, what happens if, and by the way, they should call this film How to Throw a Counter. What happens if you threw a left hook in the second round, early? Right? You're in Times Square, New York City. Right? Showcase event. You're facing a guy The sports books are not giving much of a chance. Rolly Romero, right? A guy who Gervonta Davis knocked out. It's the second round. Ryan Garcia is there. He throws a left hook. Romero blocks it. Look at the film, right? Romero, who's a righty, blocks the shot with his dominant hand, right? Why is he able to block the shot when Garcia has hand speed, when Garcia's left hook is hair trigger? It's because Garcia is not a guy who sets it up. The rest of Garcia's game isn't the kind of game where, like a magician, he has you thinking right hand and then throws the left hook when you're not expecting it. Those are the punches that hurt you, the ones you don't expect it. Well, here, folks, at world-class level in boxing, if all I have's the left hook, right, then guys are going to expect it. Guys are going to block it, right? In baseball, if all you have is a fastball, you end up in the bullpen. Now here you have Garcia, Ray Leonard type hand speed. The difference between the two is Ray Leonard made opponents pay. Ray Leonard let his hands go. Ray Leonard was a combination puncher. Had Rolly Romero been fighting Sugar Ray Leonard, Romero would have been leaning back, knowing there's a lot of hand speed coming back. It's two-handed hand speed. Ryan Garcia gets knocked down, right? Romero throws, and it's perfect. It's a left hook, lands on the button, right? But then Romero throws a second left. In other words, Romero's not just counter-punching, he's doubling up on the counter. Look at the film clip. It's really the first punch that hurts Garcia the most. Where does it hit him? On his chin. Simple question. What is Romero prioritizing? What is Garcia? What is Ryan Garcia prioritizing on defense? How is Rolly Romero able to get off 2 counters after he blocks Ryan Garcia's left hook? How's that possible? Right? How is Garcia that unprepared defensively against a slugger? Right? Look at that Devin Haney fight. If Haney's not getting knocked down in that fight, Haney's outboxing Garcia. Doesn't Garcia have to worry about what he's doing when he's not throwing power shots? Shouldn't he be out there boxing? Shouldn't he let the process, shouldn't he have a process, and shouldn't he let the process determine when he goes for the knockout? He shouldn't be going for the knockout first, right? As they tell you in baseball, just try to hit the ball. The home runs will come. Right? So let me just say, don't fall in love with fighters. Right? If you're a gambler, just call it as it is. Right? Canelo, if an opponent is aggressive against Canelo, they're going to pay. If an opponent knows that Canelo's going to have a hard time taking that extra step, and if the guy's not an ambush fighter, terrified of being in the pocket with Canelo, if a guy sees Canelo step to the pocket and actually has punches ready for him, right, and has a strategy where he's going to turn away from shots, who's actually thought about what happens if this guy catches my power shot and isn't naked to where the other guy can counter him by hitting him on the chin. Right? That chin should have been tucked, shouldn't it have been? Let me say this too. You know, there's a school of boxing where fighters have an Archie Moore type of defense. Right? The idea is, I'm going to be throwing power shots with this hand. But as you try to hit me, I'm going to have my shoulder in the way, I'm going to have my other hand up. So if you're going to counter me, my temple's going to be protected and my chin's going to be protected. That's Archie Moore. That's Foreman. That's not Ryan Garcia. That certainly is not Inoue. Right? So let's just say we need to just figure things out. And we need to look at the numbers. Let me close by saying this. NBA. This video is going way too long. I apologize for that. I know I confused the names in the Romero Ryan Garcia segment. You know what? OKC, I thought they were a done deal to win the Western Conference. Right? I need for folks to understand that they're in trouble now. This Nugget team has the best player in the game. Right? This Nugget team, even when they're tired and confused, they seem to have a unity where, at the end of games, they trust Aaron Gordon. Think about this close to the first game of the current series. Denver's best idea was to throw the ball to Aaron Gordon for 3 at the end of the game. Gordon hit it. Let's just say Denver, odds-wise, they had a 1/3 chance of winning right before Gordon releases that ball, right? Well, I need for folks to understand the splits here. Jamal Murray in Denver. Folks, I'm just going to go back to the last series against the Clippers, right? And understand the Clippers have some great defenders. Kawhi Leonard is a great defender, right? Murray at home, we're just going to talk about plus minus. In the series against the Clippers, understand Murray in 3 of the games had plus minuses, a plus of 12 or more at home, right? He feasts in Denver, right? Plus 12, plus 17, and a plus 19. That's in the last series. Murray at home in Denver. Denver's just taking the home court advantage. Let me also say, too, another guy to look at, and this is the secret to Denver. I think OKC's the better team, right? But I need for folks to understand basketball is really about volatility, right? Look at bad back Michael Porter's numbers from yesterday, right? Porter is a guy who, if he's hitting, right, he's the Robin to Joker's Batman, right? Also, the box score is scary for yesterday's game. The OKC starters got decimated, right? That box score is much more troubling than the Boston Celtic Knicks box score, right? The Celtics, I'm a Knicks fan, right? I'd like nothing better than the Knicks to win that series right now in the entire world of sports, right? But I have to be realistic. Porzingis leaves that game in the second quarter. You look at the box score, it's not as lopsided as the box score between the Nuggets and the Thunder, right? Shai has a greater than -20 plus minus. That's how lopsided the OKC box score is, right? And that's a 68-win team. So pay close attention to Denver against OKC, right? That's interesting. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comments section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.